Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Daily Blend Wrap. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, today joined by Hermann Pretorius. Let's get into the news of today. And the first story we're going to talk about is the ongoing internal battles within the ANC over the party's electoral performance, particularly in this case in KZN. The ANC has been holding a workshop in the West Rand where it is looking at how to deal with the massive drop in support that the ANC experienced in KwaZulu-Natal in particular, dropping from 54% in the 2019 elections to just 17% in the general polls. Well, this sort of all started yesterday when the Secretary General of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, or the party secretary rather, attacked Fikile and the Secretary General of the party, and the party's leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, claiming they were the reason that the party had done so badly. Saying that that this failure couldn't simply rest with the provincial leadership, and that Ramaphosa's quote-unquote weakness had played a role in the party's electoral defeat. Fikile Mbalula hit back on this, saying that he dismissed these remarks, that they had no merit. Those remarks by Motolo mean nothing. We are here now. We are moving forward. We make nothing of those remarks. They mean nothing because we are 17%. And we have told them that today. He said there was no time to play a blame game around the ANC's electoral decline in KwaZulu-Natal. They need to have a collective accountability, which is the ANC's favorite form of accountability. Herman, this to me suggests that the KZN leadership of the ANC may be dissolved or removed. That's, you wouldn't preemptively hit out like that if your political fortunes were not going to be in trouble down the line whenever this discussion concludes. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's sort of ridiculous on both sides, because no, it wasn't just Ramaphosa's weakness that caused the ANC to drop from 54% to 17%. What's that? Almost a 40-point drop. That is historic. I mean, that is by any standard of democracy, that is a shocking result. Now, a few sort of things to put this into perspective and dismiss actually both sides. Particularly Mbalula's habit of talking in weird non sequitur haikus. I mean, that quote you read, those remarks by Motolo mean nothing. We are here now, and we are moving forward. We make nothing of those remarks. They mean nothing because we are at 17%. And we have told them that it means nothing. I mean, the words follow in terms of linguistic syntax rules. It follows to make sentences, but they don't actually convey any analysis or meaning. So Mbalula isn't talking any sense. And to put it down to Ramaphosa's weakness is just dishonest, because let's take a few things into account. Yes, Ramaphosa quite likely didn't have the strong numbers that someone like Jacob Zuma had in terms of approval rating and support in KZN. That's not a surprise. The national campaign, coordinated by Luthuli House, effectively accountable to Fikile Mbalula, should have accommodated for the fact that they can't campaign like an ANC with a Zuma rather than with a Ramaphosa. So it just seems to me, looking at the campaign strategy that the ANC followed, they just fundamentally misused Ramaphosa as an electoral asset. Going into this election, he was, despite his weakness, despite many failures, and despite the decline in his popularity, by far the most popular politician in the country, and quite an electoral asset for the ANC. People generally seem to be willing to give Ramaphosa the benefit of the doubt. He has managed this successfully by pretending to be both president and leader of the opposition at the same time. When things are going well and you can sort of push the narrative of an ANC on the right track, it's Ramaphosa the president. And when there's kickback, it's Ramaphosa the opposition leader around whom society must unite to get the good guys to be victorious. So Ramaphosa wasn't used well in the ANC's campaign. He was trotted out without any real consideration of where his actual electoral appeal lay. They didn't use his statesman-like abilities. They didn't really build on his ability to be a father of the nation figure, which he more naturally is than a populist leader and sort of a fire breather to whip up the troops. So there is a national strategic error. But I think the biggest error, if we look back historically, Zuma endorses MK in December 2023. By February, March, the ANC in KZN tells the ANC nationally, don't worry, we've got the MK threat under control. We are not seeing member desertions. We are not seeing branches being taken over. And a few weeks later, that's exactly what happened. So yes, Ramaphosa wasn't well used as an electoral asset, but the local ANC just totally misread the MK threat and, until too late, told the national campaign that there was nothing to worry about, that their news, their surveys, their reports from the branches were showing that they weren't seeing desertions, they were seeing loyal membership. And so, both of these people are wrong. It's just so sad that a political party seriously in need of introspection can find only fingers to point.
Indeed. It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how this shakes out, because I think that ultimately what we're really seeing here is maneuvering before the ANC's next internal elective conference, not really an attempt to review the party's internal problems. Okay, let's move on to the next story, and this is some bad news on the economic front, but it could be worse, I suppose. South Africa's economy quarter-on-quarter contracted by 0.3%. From the second to the third quarter. Year on year, the economy is only 0.3% bigger in the third quarter of this year than it was the year previous. The biggest problem here seems to have been the agriculture sector, which shrank by about 30%. Mostly, it seems, due to drought and also the many other issues affecting the agricultural sector. Economists had expected a growth of around 0.5% this quarter, so this is definitely below expectations. There was also a slowdown in transport services, exports fell, and there's also some things which are not so bad, like government spending falling a bit. But the largest sector in the economy, finance, did once again have another quarter where it grew, and construction had the largest growth it's seen in 2 years. Still, not great news for the country's economy. We're really still not seeing any kind of real growth there. And I suspect that's because we haven't seen the kind of reforms that we're going to need to have to our economy in order to see that growth. Hermann, what do you make of this?
So I think 3 points are worth noting from this data. Number one is agriculture is incredibly high risk sector. It is dependent on forces and factors that you can't control. That means that if we're going to look at the health of that sector and we look at the elements that we can control, we should make those as constructive as possible. Labor relations, property rights, rural security, rural service delivery, transport infrastructure to get goods to market. Those things should be in place so that in case the circumstances don't line up for optimal delivery in that sector, you can still make sure that the sector performs relatively well. So you can't control the weather, but you can control these other things that I think the agricultural sector have been let down by.
Right. And when times are good, farmers will have more opportunity to take advantage of those exact things that you mentioned.
Exactly. And commercial farming is actually quite a complex financial situation. So number one is get the things in your power right. We're not doing that. So that is why bad circumstances in a high risk sector like this can knock us so badly in terms of our overall numbers. The second thing is property rights. Now, this isn't just a liberal jumping onto the issue of property rights with the slightest provocation. it is really important to understand here that when farm deliveries go bad, when the harvest doesn't come in, when the output isn't what you need it to be, the reason a commercial farm can survive that knock is because of the depth of its financial security. It can use its assets. The farmer can use the assets of that farm, including the farm itself, to secure the necessary financial backstops, as it were, should the gamble of a harvest go wrong due to a whole range of circumstances. The moment you start tinkering with property rights, you tinker with that financial support structure that allows agriculture to be the sort of commercially viable industry that we need it to be. You need assets to retain their worth so that in years like this or in quarters like this, when the sector gets a knock, that sector has enough capital within it to recover so that the next set of circumstances can offer recovery rather than just down and out destruction. And then the third point that is worth making is that this economy would have grown by 0.4% if the agriculture contraction wasn't there. But 0.4% is still lower than what economists had expected at 0.5%. I am very worried that what we're seeing here is the end of the GNU sugar rush, that we saw positive sentimental indicators that cannot actually maintain themselves for more than 2-3 quarters. The GNU must be very aware of how critical its substantive progressive steps might be in terms of making this country investor friendly. We've started getting our debt under control. We've started reining in spending except on infrastructure. Those are good fiscal moves, but we haven't yet freed up our economy as it should. And the sentiment and the welcome feel-good factor of the GNU won't last us too long. This is a call back to reality to, number one, get the basics right. Number two, don't karang with things that don't need to be karanged with, like property rights. And thirdly, if you want this GNU to do well in terms of delivery and political capital, it needs to deliver. It needs to start pointing to real successes. The vibes won't go far beyond the next quarter or the start of 2025.
Definitely. All right. Last story is that the Border Management Authority of South Africa says that since July of 2022, it has stopped 410,000 people from attempting to enter the country illegally. This is according to the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, who was speaking to the media on Monday, saying, quote, further, we have been able to detect about 312 high-value vehicles that were meant to illegally exit the country to other jurisdictions in the continent. In this regard, matters were handed over to SAP's detectives for further investigation. They also say that they are going to be working together with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development going forward to utilize drones to monitor the border more effectively. Which definitely seems like a positive development. He said that the majority of people, of those 410,000 who were stopped from entering the country illegally, were fingerprinted, declared undesirable for a period of 5 years, and deported. Herman, I think this sounds like good news that there has been some activity on the border to try and sort of bring it under control. I also think it kind of brings into sharp focus how big the scale of this problem is, that you have a very, very large number of people moving across the border. What do you make of this?
Well, firstly, I don't mean to be a cynic, but I do question the numbers. Because about halfway through or a quarter way through that article, there's a link to another article from only a month ago where it says Border Management Agency stops 36,000 illegal entries within a year. Now, I'm not great shakes at maths, but if you're going to say 2022 23 and 24, and you've stopped 36,000 every year, you've stopped about 100,000 people, not 400,000. So somewhere the math isn't mathing. Now, I might be understanding the numbers incorrectly, but firstly, there's a question about what these numbers actually mean. Secondly, I think 312 high-value vehicles being stopped is an embarrassingly low number. I mean, I've seen since July 2022, I've probably seen 312 illegal high-value vehicles drive past me. If it were my job to stop them, and I stopped only 312, perhaps, as a one-man band, that might be impressive. But somehow that doesn't quite strike me as the success we want it to be. But the third point that I think is worth raising is that there seems, at long last, to be a realization that governance and politics are one and the same thing. Immigration has become such a charged political issue. During the campaign, the Patriotic Alliance mobilized it effectively. MK mobilized on it somewhat. Action SA tried to, but they failed, but they're now seeing some more vuma on that score in terms of the spaza shops and the illegal miners. But up to now, there has been such a dearth of communication in terms of what actually is going on with our border authorities. We've had ministers of Home Affairs make statements to Parliament, but very rarely have we actually had this idea that border authorities realize, my goodness, we have to communicate with the public. So I do welcome that. I do welcome the fact that the public is now slightly being invited into what's going on this issue. It is a potent issue because it is a proxy issue. Illegal immigration isn't just about illegal immigration. It is about housing, education, hospitals, infrastructure, transport, job security, pensions, crime. It really is a proxy of issues. So it is potent, but it is welcome to at last have some feedback from the authorities, from the people who are responsible for this, and they should do this more regularly. Because, Nick, you would know, as someone who's been an elected official, quite often the best thing you can show a constituent is your effort to solve the problem. Quite often the problem isn't quite of your making or within your purview to solve, but voters do respect the effort you put in if you communicate with them. So I do think this is a welcome development, though there's still a lot of work to do to understand these numbers. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they accurate? Are they consistent? But, more of this, please. Let's have lots of data coming out that we can question and investigate, rather than no data and just the sort of thing that there's a vibe at the border rather than an authority.
No, I think that's a very good point. All right, that's all the time we have for today. We hope you found the show interesting. This is our second last show of the year. So we'll wrap up the year tomorrow with a wrap episode. I hope and then we'll have some special episodes which have already been recorded that will go up after that. I think.
When you say wrap episode, is it sort of, what wrap do you? Oh, WRAP, like wrapping on the year, not RAP. Okay, sorry, that would have been awkward.
No one wants to see anyone associated with the Daily Friend rapping. I can tell you that much.
Fair enough.
Anyway,
especially not with my mellifluous baritone tenor tones.
Yes, no, opera maybe, but rap not so much. But anyway, cheers everyone. Have a good day. The Daily Friend Show and the Daily Friend are a project of the Institute of Race Relations, the IRR. The IRR is a think tank which was founded in 1929 to study race relations in South Africa and works to change government policy to improve race relations through non-racialism and to ensure the prosperity of all South Africans. If you like our work and would like to support us, please go to irr.org.za and click Support the IRR, or you can go to thedailyfriend.co.za and click the Fund Us button.